Hello everyone, welcome to the latest CAS Inspire webinar entitled Supporting the Health and Wellbeing of Teenagers with our fantastic guest speaker, Joe Morton-Brown. My name is Tim Wilson. I will be your host today, and in the wings is my colleague Pete Marshman, who will be moderating and keeping an eye on all the comments and questions coming through today. So a little bit about us. We both work in the outreach team at Computing at School. We're responsible for the regional growth and delivery of CAS, our community of practice program, and we do this as part of the National Centre for Computing Education as well. This webinar is the latest in our CAS Inspire series, which is a series of really valuable events, podcasts and videos, which consists of live webinars such as this one with expert panelists such as the fabulous Joe, discussing topical computing education matters and other education matters. And we hope that you as the audience can get involved and will get involved today. So we've got an action-packed webinar and I'll introduce Joe in 30 seconds or so. But for those of you who are new to these events, if you're an attendee, you can listen only, but you can still contribute. So if you have questions or comments for Joe during the session, please use the question window on the right-hand side of your screen to ask questions. Pete will be moderating your questions as they come through, and if we have time at the end, we will relay these to Joe. And if there are any outstanding questions that we don't ask Joe, we will be sure to ask her separately after the event and share her insights on our social media channels. Finally, you will notice at the top of the window on your dashboard a little handy orange rectangle, and this can be expanded or collapsed to enhance your viewing pleasure accordingly. On to our speaker, Joe Morton-Brown. Joe works as an emotional health practitioner with Flourish. Joe blends many different roles into one. She is a BACP accredited school-based counsellor, a family support worker, and a provider of training to adults on mental health in children and young people. And in this session, you'll find out, in fact, Joe will share guidance and information on how to support the health and well-being of teenagers. Joe believes that early intervention is key, and we'll be sharing her insights into how you as teachers and educators can play a pivotal role in supporting the mental health of students. Finally, if you are social media boffin like me during the event, please use the hashtag CASInspire, and I will post the Twitter handles for Joe and myself and Pete in the chat in a moment. But I really hope that you enjoy the session and gain lots of insight. And without further ado, I'll hand over to Joe to go. Go for it, Joe.
Thank you. Hi there, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. I too work at a secondary school, and I know how busy life can be. So whether you're watching this live or maybe watching this at a later point, I'd just like to highlight that I'm really grateful for you taking the time to kind of watch this and to learn actually the importance of what you can do as an educator, as a teacher, as a member of staff within a school. Life itself is busy. I'm not too sure how it's happened really. I knew that going back to school would be manic, but I don't know what it quite is right now. It's certainly at the school that I work at, and from my colleagues at other schools, it's just really, really busy and really, really hectic. So during this webinar, I'd like us to kind of explore, you know, what's going on for young people. And when I say young people or children, I'm talking about students, I'm talking about the pupils that you work with. I'd also like to give you the skills and confidence of how to deal with certain students that may be struggling with regards to their attitude in learning, maybe their behaviour, maybe their overall kind of emotional well-being. And it's to allow you to realise the importance of your role, as well as actually the real important part, which is about you looking after yourself. which might sound a bit fluffy, but actually I think sometimes we just need to be reminded that actually for you to be a really, really good teacher, for you to be, you know, a really good employee at the school that you work at, is actually about the importance of you taking time for you as well. So yeah, as Tim explained, I have different roles, and I really am a keen and a firm and keen believer that early intervention is so important. And that's what I really want us to remember today, is that actually you can do these little things that add up to great big things to help the well-being of students. So I'd like us to explore where we've been the last 18 months. Now, as a member of the British Association of Counselling and Psychotherapy, you'll notice this generation COVID-19. And the reason that I particularly like that front cover is actually the ABC is completely different nowadays. And actually, if you was to consider the last time that a student fully completed an academic year, actually we're talking about 2 years ago. So somebody that's in year 11 actually completed a full academic year a couple of years ago. So it just shows that actually it's kind of unknown, unfamiliar territory for everybody, I'd also like to highlight actually that we're still in this pandemic, and with this pandemic, many of us have gone through quite a bit ourselves. And I'm really sorry if you're somebody that has lost somebody recently, or, you know, over the past 18 months to COVID or not, but actually about how possibly not easy it's been when it has been adjusting to change and to possibly loss. So actually, let's just have a reality check. As a counsellor myself, I have to have clinical supervision. Last week I went there and I wasn't rude. I think highly of my supervisor, bless him, he's brilliant. I just said to him, you know, still no water. That's all I said, like still no cups and still no water. And he just reminded me, Jo, we're still in a pandemic. And I just thought that that was so true, because actually I think it's quite easy for us to forget where we're at, and that actually we're still living within this pandemic. And whether your school, my school have just reintroduced masks again for in and around the corridors, it's just a reminder that actually life is, this pandemic hasn't gone away. And actually, as you'll see on that particular slide, there's a lot of loss that each and every one of us have gone through, not just necessarily with the loss of a loved one, but actually about the change, about the kind of the routine that we've had. And I think sometimes there has been that loss of independence and freedom. So not only is it about ourselves and checking in with where we're at, but let's apply this to a young person, you know, to a student, to a pupil, and actually to experience kind of, and to think about and empathize actually what's it been like for them. And they have had a loss of independence and freedom. You know, those new year 7s that you have at your school may not necessarily be as confident as previous year groups, and I'm talking about year 9 plus, because ideally when they're in year 6, it's about being given maybe a bit of money and you go to town and be at this place for me to collect you from their parents or carers, or to catch the bus. They've not necessarily had that opportunity to go out, to go to the cinema, and to meet their friends, and that actually is really massive. I know that personally at my secondary school, the year 7s last year were really, they were playing What's the Time, Mr. Wolf in the playground in the September and October. And what was great is that we have a separate year 7 playground, so they could. But even this year group, for this year, for 2021, of the year 7s, there's this real sense of not quite as mature as previous year groups when they've entered year 7. So yes, lots that we've gone through and lots that we're still going through. And I think it's about just having to remember and to remind ourselves that actually this pandemic is still around us. I've got a lot of friends and a lot of colleagues across the country, obviously with COVID within the schools as well. And actually, I think that sometimes that can trigger fear or worry or anxiety within us as well. So yeah, Now, this is possibly my most important slide, and this is actually a really, really important quote that I would love for you to remember, please. This particular quote, which is so true, is every interaction that you do with a young person, with a student, with a pupil, is an intervention. I deliver the MHFA training course, I deliver twilight sessions, and I have so many teachers, so many people within education that are, I'm not a counsellor. What course do I need to do to become somebody that can, speak about mental health? And actually, as a teacher, all I really need you to do is to have that ability to interact with your students, to interact with your pupils, because actually it's offering that support where you can be there. And even if they don't use it, then just knowing that you're there is the most important thing. And I just don't want us to forget about the importance of your role, of what you're able to achieve. It might not necessarily always be easy, and I get that. And it's very much like safeguarding, I believe, that a student will maybe tell you sometimes a little bit of a story when it comes to their emotional well-being and their mental health. But actually, it's about the picture that they're painting, that they're maybe just testing you with. And it's same too with safeguarding. I want you to praise yourself. If you have a student, if you have a pupil that actually reveals part of their home life, maybe a safeguarding concern, maybe a story with regards to how they're feeling, I really want you to actually have that moment to think, wow, I am that kind of teacher, or I am becoming that teacher, that kind of teacher that can really listen and be there for your students. So yeah, it's about the importance of realizing that actually you don't need to be a mental health professional. You just need to be somebody that simply cares. So in the chat feature, and I'm going to ask Pete to help me out here with the chat feature, I'd be most grateful if you could do a list or just a couple of what do you believe that your students may be stressing about. Now, try not to be shy and quiet for me, because I've been warned, but I'm like, no way, they're going to be interactive, I hope. So if you can just type in that text box for me, what do you believe that your students have to stress about? It might not necessarily be just your students at your school, but in general as well. Pete, are you there?
Indeed.
Oh,
Hi, Joe.
I was just thinking.
So I'm just monitoring that for you, so it took me a little while to drop in.
I'm on my own.
That's absolutely fine. So I'll just keep an eye on these. Whilst they're coming in, Joe, are there any that have come to you directly this question, and I'll read them out as they come in?
If you can I can't read any.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, just shout them out for me, then that would be most appreciated. Are they going to be
So
shy?
One of them is obviously about exams and not knowing what they're going to look like. It's a big one, so I guess we'll start with that. How would you say is a good way for a teacher to handle that type of conversation?
I think that when it comes to exams and the uncertainty is that we can't forget that actually we don't know what's going on. If we knew as teachers, and I spoke to a head teacher the other day who's also an Ofsted inspector, and he's just said to me, I don't know how they're going to play out. And I think that's the hardest thing, is that actually we're almost kind of cradling this uncertainty, not only for our students, but also for ourselves as well, because we truly don't know. And I think that with regards to your students, it's about being honest with them and about realizing that we're in this together.
Great. And Joe, another one is sort of around kind of commitments. So a lot of the students that I see or teach, sometimes that comes in around, they've now got all these clubs starting up, they're trying to catch up on their sporting activities, all of their evenings are being taken up with clubs, whether it's kind of scouts or it's netball or whatever it is. It all seems to be coming back in, I guess, as everyone is, everything's reopening up, right? So everyone wants everyone back. So I know a lot of the students are struggling to manage that time and tiredness. So that's one from me, but that's
a really good one. That's a really good one. And I think the hardest thing is almost a sense, if you're a parent or a carer or an auntie or an uncle, a grandparent who's watching this particular webinar, is it's realizing that actually, you know, having that, knowing that we have those children in our lives, that we do want them to get going, that we do want them to start up with these hobbies, that we do want them to get involved and make friends and get going. But actually it's about the child, and I think that it's a really individual task. Now, the hardest thing is being a teacher is that, you know, you can't suggest that they're doing too much. But actually, I think the important thing is to just kind of check in with them. And, you know, I noticed that you're doing a lot. Is, you know, is this everything that, you know, is there anything in particular that you're really enjoying? And just almost give them that space and that opportunity for them to say, actually, I'm doing this and I can't stand it. Not just for you to act on, but actually sometimes for them to just, for you to allow them the space to verbalize it, which also means that you're giving them the opportunity to think about it. Because I believe that sometimes we're just so busy, us included, that actually we just get in such a kind of a role that actually we forget exactly what's going on. So
Great.
yeah.
I've got another one for you, Jo, which is around kind of the feeling of being kind of left behind. So not lost learning as such, but kind of missed learning, I guess is the way. So with some you know, students being isolated at home or whatever, and feeling that they've not been in school as much as their peers. How does that play out?
That is a huge one. One of my year 10 students, now year 11 actually, she missed half of year 9 and obviously latter part half of year 10. When she was in school, certainly September last year until Christmas, she had to self-isolate because of her year group and a bubble 3 times. And then when she did come back to school, like everybody in March, didn't necessarily have to self-isolate, but was sent home a couple of times just to, you know, all year 11, 10 students were. And her being in year 10 now, she just feels so behind, so lost. What's the point? And almost, I think the hardest thing for her is to get her to find that motivation. And again, it's the uncertainty. And I believe that all we can do as teachers, as supporting them, is to recognize that actually it has not been easy. And I do really feel that actually when a child feels heard, when a child feels understood, you sometimes just break down that barrier and can sometimes allow them to find the need to continue and to almost inspire them to realize that actually, you know, we're in this together. So it's just about, again, just being that supportive teacher that can allow them to realize that they're not on their own and that it is scary, you know, especially when our friends might have COVID and we don't necessarily need to self-isolate. So it's just about being real with them personally.
Great, thanks, Jo. That's all I've got so far on
Brilliant.
That one.
That's perfect. We might come back to that later if there's any extras. Thank you, Pete.
No worries.
So there's quite a lot of things for our students to stress about, to worry about, and that's not all. That's, you know, we've got to think about, and I was just about to say to Pete, you know, we'll go back to this later, but we won't, because I will be explaining it to you now. Home life, friendships, relationships, kind of that relationship that the student has with their teacher, it's massive. It's massive. Toxic friendships, you know, and home life is so busy and sometimes so, I'm trying to think of the right word, so hard when they have other siblings or when they're caring for their parents or a young carer themselves. Is that it's just having to have this understanding and this ability to empathize and to kind of be firm but be fair with your boundaries, and we will come to that. So there is a lot that goes on, is what I'm trying to say for them, really. So what I'd like to do is kind of, I don't mean to throw you in the deep end with regards to this knowledge, but I really feel that it's important that if you can just take away a sense of understanding about anxiety, about self-harm, about panic attacks, and about suicide. So it's just giving you these quick first aid skills for you to just have there within your mind. So with regards to anxiety, anxiety is something that can actually be the trigger and the gateway to other mental ill health conditions. So that's a really, really important thing. But what I also want us to bear in mind is that anxiety is helpful. It's natural for us to feel a certain amount of anxiety. And actually, there is that difference between feeling anxious and stressed compared to an anxiety disorder. So there is a difference. And actually, we want our students to feel that stress to a certain degree. We want them to allow them to feel a certain amount of healthy pressure, because that allows them to focus and do their work. So it is needed. It's just sometimes, as you can imagine, you know, you've got your computing lessons, but it's also the quantity of other lessons as well. So it's tough. But human beings, we are so diverse. There is nobody out there that we can actually say, oh, I know how you feel, because we're so different. And I think that that's really important that we need to bear in mind, is that we can't necessarily say to a friend, a family member, but a student, oh yeah, I know how you feel, I went through that, because it was different, you know. And one great example is that, you know, just I normally do this in a massive like theatre or something when I do these presentations, and it's a lot better because it's more interactive and I get to see the odd smiles. But one of my activities that I do with the delegates is I'll say to them, you know, hands up if you've ever been 16. And as you can imagine, everybody's hand goes up. And then it's like, okay, hands up if you've ever been 16 in the year 2020. And obviously, nobody's hands go up. And that's the importance of what I'm trying to say to you, is that we have never been 16, 12, 15 years old in the here and now. Therefore, it is going to be really hard for us to have a certain amount of understanding when it does come to them, I don't know, social media and their phones, for example. So yes, that anxiousness, that stress varies from person to person, and so too does it when it gets that bit too much. Can that anxiety disorder also vary from person to person? Now, I'm starting for us to just briefly, and I mean a whistle stop of each one, briefly talk about an anxiety disorder. So when we hear children go, oh, you know, I've got anxiety, okay, but actually this part of this particular slide is actually when it comes to an anxiety disorder, okay? And then you'll notice there that you have those particular anxiety conditions, those anxiety disorders that can really get in the way for our students. And one of those in particular could be separation anxiety. I'm pretty certain that you'll have a student that you know, or maybe within your tutor group, or a colleague has within their class, that will be struggling with maybe refusing to come to school. Now, they used to be called school refusers, but actually the new name is emotional-based school avoidance. And it's those students that just genuinely struggle to come to school. And it's those students that, obviously, as you can imagine, there's the separation anxiety, there's the social kind of anxiety with regards to corridors and being around people that they don't know, as well as maybe for some of them, they get themselves in such a state that there might well be a panic attack. So yeah, just so you know that. But here are your, and this is just a selection that I feel are most relevant with regards to anxiety disorders. PTSD, you might think, not too sure, Joe, but actually, yes, that is a possibility. I had a student a few years ago that their best friend died in a house fire. The student that I was working with wasn't there at the scene. However, what happened is that student suffered from secondary PTSD. Being her best friend and being able to see the photos in the newspaper and in the news, and even the videos that were on social media, is that they really were suffering from that PTSD. So it's just, I'm not asking you to become somebody to do the diagnosis, because that's for the doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists to be doing. But actually, when you do have worries about a student, it's about just maybe looking out for those warning signs. And it's about you referring that onto the pastoral or the wellbeing team, just to let them know your concerns. Personally, it never hurts, even if you look like you're that teacher that, you know, here they go again. I would much rather you be one of those teachers that is too on it than actually not on it at all. So if you have any concerns about your students, then just follow that safeguarding procedure. So panic attacks. Panic attacks is obviously to do with feeling overwhelmed in that particular moment. I have seen teachers almost struggle with what to do and what to say. And I get that. They've potentially got a class of up to 30 students that they need to also look after. However, I just want you to have, again, that experience of maybe having what questions to ask. The most important thing that I need you to do is to just ask them, have you ever felt like this before? Because if they have, then they can say it's a panic attack and you can just understand that. But if they haven't, we don't know the condition of their heart or their medical conditions, undiagnosed even. So sometimes it might be calling medical for 999. So it's just about that. I've never had a panic attack, I've seen it, but apparently the sensations, the signs and symptoms of a panic attack can be very similar to a heart attack. So that's why I just want us to be careful. I'd like you to be able to ask the student, actually, what can I do to help? Giving them that sense of control that actually you're there to help support them. Now, that might be to usher them out of the classroom to somewhere quiet, which would be great. But also, it might also be, would you like a friend to be with you? So again, it's allowing them that sense of control as much as you can within that classroom. It's your classroom, it's your rules, it's your boundaries, but it's just allowing that student to have that space, hopefully quiet space, where they can actually work on their breathing. Obviously, with a panic attack, it's too much oxygen that they're breathing in, and not enough, those out breaths aren't long enough for the carbon dioxide. So it's just in. So actually what we need to do is we need them to focus on their breath. Now, I'm just going to give you a couple of breathing techniques that you might like, let alone the student, just to kind of give them that something. One is finger breathing. It's literally taking a breath in and out. Now, the beauty when it comes to finger breathing, or also lotus breathing, it's just again with the hand, is that it takes their attention from this in a classroom, in the corridor, in the school hall, to their hand. And also what you can do is you can be really discreet and do that finger tracing. They can do it in their lap, they can do it in their pocket. It's quite nice because it's quite discreet. And with that, it will just allow them to focus on touch rather than sight around them. And again, allowing them to just find that ability to self-soothe. The other one is box breathing. It can also be with the shape of a rectangle. Basically, what we're looking to do is for them to trace the shape of a square or a rectangle. In breath, the corner represents a pause, out breath. If you're going to do a rectangle, then make sure that the longest line of that rectangle is the out breath. So there's just a couple for you. My other favourite one is 3-4-5. The reason that I say the 3-4-5 is because there are so many different breathing techniques. 7-11 I've heard, there's just loads. The 3-4-5 is nice and simple. Breathing in for 3, hold for 4, out for 5. Breathing in for 3, hold for 4, out for 5. So it's just about allowing them to have that sense of empowerment. My final one that I'd want you to be aware of is giving them the ability to ground themselves. Now, it's great if you're able to be with them, brilliant, but that isn't always possible. And I think we have to be realistic there, that if you're teaching or if you're on your way to a lesson, it is saying to them that I really want to be with you right now, but I can't, but I will check on you later. My favourite grounding technique is 5-4-3-2-1. I'm testing myself here. I can do the 5, the 4 and 3, and then it gets a little bit tricky. 5 things that they can see. So it's just asking them, look around you. What 5 things can you see? What 4 things can you hear? Now, what we're starting to do is we're allowing them to find their conscious awareness with where they're at in that space at that time. 3 things are 3 things that you can touch. So right now I can feel my beanie because I am so cold and I daren't put the heating on. I can feel the weight of my body in the chair and I can feel my hand. Then it goes to, and this is tricky, okay? 2 things that you can smell. I personally don't know if it's possible to smell 2 things, but you can challenge them. And then the final one is 1 thing that you can taste. So it's called the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding technique. So just to recap, 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. And also, just that final question there is actually, if that student has experienced that with you, is maybe letting them know, actually, can we do an action plan? Can we actually let other teachers know, so then you don't feel like this in lesson? And, you know, just trying to realise and allow them to recognise that actually you care, that you care. Okay, so just briefly, and what I would recommend is, you know, finding additional training. There's not enough hours in the day, I know that, but the MHFA have got some good courses. Papyrus has some good courses as well. It's just allowing you to find a course with the right amount of time, rather than me rushing through this, where you can actually have the ability to learn this properly. My biggest thing here is about suicide. Is actually that sometimes what happens with students is that they just cannot see the point of living. Now, my 2 questions would be to that student that's actually been very open and abrupt, and, you know, that they wish to take their own life or they wish to kill themselves. And I want to be sensitive, because some of the teachers that are watching this now, or the educators that might be watching this later, might have experienced this. Is I want us to just recognise with that student, is that the thought of you taking your own life, where you die and you don't ever see anybody again? Or actually, is that because you are so tired right now in life that you just want to go to sleep and wake up when it's all better? I feel that sometimes just having that ability to just try and find out where they're at can be a really good gauge for us, certainly when it comes to that safeguarding and reporting that concern. The biggest thing about suicide is that actually there's this myth that if you as a teacher, as a professional, was to actually speak to them about it, or to even ask them, the myth is that you might be planting that idea in their head. That is false. That is false. And actually, I'm not asking you to be brutally honest with your words. But what I am asking you to do is, if your student that you're working with, if your student there and then is actually giving you clues, little cues that this is what they're insinuating, you can be honest with them. Again, it's with the tone of voice, it's making sure that your body language is open, it's making sure that you catch your shock, that you hold that, and that actually you can say to them, you know, I'm not too sure if I'm getting this right, but from what you're saying, it sounds as if life is really hard to live right now. It might be actually, when life can be sometimes too much, sometimes people have thoughts about taking their own life. I wonder if you've thought about that before. It just allows you to have that ability of finding out the fact. It doesn't plant the idea in their head. I wouldn't want you to ask them, and this is just to reiterate, I wouldn't want you to ask them, you know, have you thought about killing yourself? Have you thought about taking your own life in a way of, you know, hanging yourself or taking an overdose? I don't want you to give them the suggestions of the method, but it is just finding out, have they felt like this? Do they feel like this? Because what can often happen is we have this ability to actually realise where we're at with them when it comes to that safeguarding. And that's the most important thing, rather than, did I get this right? Did I get this wrong? It's about really knowing where you stand. Self-harm. Self-harm is another one. It's massive. And the reason that I've got this picture of the clouds is that we have to realise and get our young person to realise, our student to realise, that this is an urge. This is the temptation of them wanting to self-harm. And like a cloud, it will roll in and it will roll out, okay? It will roll out. The thing that I need us to do is I need us to, for them, to have ideas and techniques for them to distract themselves. Now, ideally, what we'll be working on is 2 minutes, and we'll be building it up to 10 minutes. So it's about them having that understanding that, you know, when you're in that moment of wanting to self-harm, just go and do something different. And then if in 2 minutes you come back, go again and do something different for 2 minutes, because eventually that will pass. Now, what you'll notice is on that particular slide, there is, I think it's up to 10 I've added, of ideas for you to kind of suggest. And again, it might be making a note of these, but maybe working with a student, you know, you saying, I've got some ideas, you know, let's do it together. Let's do it together, because I think sometimes that's the most important thing. I don't want you to come across in that you're the adult, they're the student, you know more than them. I want it to be a sense of equalness, and I want it to be a sense where you can contribute and you can be there to support them. So yeah, there's just a few ideas for you. Obviously, because this will be added, I believe Tim said, to YouTube, and you'll be able to watch this again, at least you can go through those minimizers to help you at a later stage. So I'm really sorry that I'm whizzing through. I'm going to show that a different time. A couple of my last slides is that I want us to bear in mind that with behaviour can sometimes be telling us something. Now, behaviour that is expressed can sometimes be because of something. Often it might be because they may not necessarily be in a good place. And this is where it's really important that you realise that even when that student is in a safe environment, such as school, that actually they have those survival modes, that fight or flight that will go off with the smallest of things. Changing a seating plan, you know, not the same teacher, something as silly will just put them off. And it's about the realisation that actually it's just kind of having that sense of understanding. And obviously, as you can imagine, for them as a young person, self-preservation is certainly more important than learning. But what you have got to understand, if you will, please, is that if you're in the staff room and a staff member came in and threw their bag across the table, you're making yourself a cup of tea and they're just bawling, we wouldn't necessarily be shouting at them. We'd be trying to support our colleague. And that's what I just need us to have, that mindfulness of actually trying to reason with them. Kids won't necessarily agree to this, but actually they enjoy school because there is boundaries, there are rules, they know them. And actually what happens is that when they're not at school, they miss them. So that's why, as a teacher, and I'm not talking about behaviour today because that's not my topic right now, but it is about the importance of you having this sense of understanding about you being firm but fair. And actually it's about having those boundaries that's really, really important. So yes, it's just trying to realise and understand that actually it's not always as simple as that. I'm just going to kind of go through these ones. So a student who may be refusing to take off their coat, it might be because they feel more secure in their coat. A student who's refusing to hand over their phone might actually be because it's their only link that they have with a safe person in the outside world. And again, a student avoiding work, it might actually be a massive fear of them getting it wrong. Don't forget, on the opposite to that, those young people that are perfectionists. Perfectionist is what they may be, but actually what it really is having a fear of failure. And I think that's the most important thing that we need to bear in mind. So as I bring our session to a close, I just want you to be aware that I have written an article and a resource that will be published later on through CAS and CAS Inspire, and that is about ways that you can help improve and make your classroom, your computing classroom, more kind of friendly and kind of allowing them to feel safe. I've had to go with the two pictures here, in the past and now. Like, look at those computers. Like, look at those computers on the left. That's pretty impressive. So yeah, it's just, I wanted you to know that there's that resource. And then it's about the importance of you and you having that work-life balance. Now, it's not always easy, and I get that, but actually it's just making the most of and realizing that good night's sleep is needed with your blue light filter may be scheduled on your phone. The importance of not necessarily exercising, but just staying active, going for walks, doing some gentle stretches in the morning. And also your time on your phone is actually to turn off your notifications for your school emails, certainly out of hours, certainly out of hours. Since the lockdown, since, you know, school went online, I feel that teachers have been expected to be 24/7. And just because an email is sent to you out of hours does not mean that you have to reply to that always out of hours, unless you're safeguarding. That's, you know, just because they're sending you an email out of hours does not mean that you have to send it. For your own well-being, what you might prefer to do is to actually have the ability where you might prepare your email, but actually to send it the next morning at 7 o'clock in the morning, or, you know, whatever time, but it will just show that you've got those boundaries. That's what's really, really important. I'm just doing a time check here. 1 minute, 1 minute, 2 slides. Here is some additional signposting for you. Shout UK is a text message service for young people for counselling via text. You've got Couth UK, again, another counselling service via the computer, laptop phones, and that is postcode depending. You have got Young Minds. They are brilliant with regards to resources, certainly when it might come to Mental Health Awareness Day or Children's Mental Health Awareness Week. And I am also on YouTube, which just sounds crazy to say that. I have a channel called Flourish. I'd be most grateful if you was to ever check it out. It's actually for children and young people. It's actually a way of you helping support them. I feel that as teachers, you can only do so much. And I wanted to create this channel that can actually allow the young people, the children, to feel supported outside school. So yes, please feel free to suggest that. It's for the ages of 10 to 19-year-olds, if not adults too, if I'm honest. But it's about being professional in the videos, and it's about promoting good mental health, which is the most important thing. Oh my gosh, Tim and Pete, look at that. On time. I would just like to say to everybody, thank you so much for joining me, whether you're watching this live or even if you're watching this recorded. There are my details. You are more than welcome to get in touch with me. And I'd just like to say a very big thank you for you taking the time out of your school day or out of your personal life to actually think about your students and actually the ways that you can best help them. And just don't forget that every interaction that you do is a really good intervention, and actually showing that you care is a lot better than just not addressing it at all, or not showing that you care, or not listening. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so much, Jo. Yeah, I love that sort of setting up slide that you shared, that every interaction is an intervention.
Yeah, it's a good one.
It set the scene for the whole session, I think, and really powerful. Lots and lots of tips, lots of advice. And I don't know if, Pete, you have any questions that have come in. I think we've got time for literally 1 or maybe 2.
Okay.
Sorry, Pete. How can I close the PowerPoint, or am I best just to keep it going?
Just keep it going. It's fine. We can see you. It's all good.
Yeah, and then that allows people to check out your website, etc. as well, doesn't it? So I've got, how do you create a safe space to enable a student to talk to you if they have an issue? So I know you kind of alluded to this slightly about the conversation you might have, but how do you create that safe space? What tips have you got, Jo?
Can I just say that's a really hard one, because as teachers, as educators, a classroom is busy. And working in a computing room is busy, screens and the sound of the monitors and things like that. But it really is about creating a calm space where ideally it's a one-to-one with you and that student, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's outside having a walk. It's just about having that uninterrupted time together where you can show them that you're listening. It might not necessarily be with direct eye contact, but it is about being with them, maybe side on side, not fidgeting, not on your phone, not typing. And I know I do this, and when you're typing and you're like, it's about just being with them. And what will happen is the more you create that, the more people will realise that that's the type of teacher that you are, and that will automatically become your environment.
Excellent. Well, that's I think, Tim, that's probably the key question there. But of course, Joe, they can get in touch with you from your email address as well.
Yes,
So
definitely.
if there's any further questions that come through, I'm sure they can get in touch with you. Is that right? That's all good,
Yeah,
isn't it?
more than welcome to.
Excellent stuff. I'll pass back over to Tim then.
Thank you, Pete. Joe, massive thank you for sharing such great insight.
You're
Pete, thank you for being my wingman once again. Okay, so for those of you tuning in, at the end of the webinar, there will be a short survey which will appear on the screen. As always, we are immensely grateful for your feedback, so please, it takes literally a minute of your time. Please complete the survey, let us know your thoughts. Also, for those of you who signed up and are listening, well, you'll be listening to this post the event live, so you will know that the recording of the webinar will be available pronto because you will have listened to it. So yes, so that's also a promise. Okay, coming up, we still have lots of amazing CAS Inspire sessions coming up on Tuesdays and Thursdays before half term, and then after half term they'll be going to Wednesdays. So keep an eye out on our schedules and on our social media for all the CAS Inspire sessions that are coming up. And please take the time, if you haven't, to join your local CAS community. Many of you probably haven't, so go on our website and join your local CAS community and see what's happening in your area. Anyway, that's it for today's CAS Inspire session. Once again, thank you to Joe, thank you to Pete, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. So thank you and bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.